All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going on a bit of a journey, a descent, really. We're going to start high up with these massive macro-sociological warnings about centralized AI, and we're going to travel all the way down to the bare metal of unmediated physical hardware. We're looking way past all that marketing hype you hear about modern AI to unpack a huge, mostly invisible battle that's raging over the digital infrastructure you rely on every single day.
We actually have to start with this incredibly stark warning from Emad Mustak, the former head of Stability AI. Back during the early days of the generative AI boom, he explicitly warned us. He said, "We have to decentralize right now." Why? Because if we don't, these centralized models are going to enact systemic lock-in. He argued that we are literally at a tipping point. If we aren't careful, we're looking at massive disruption to how we live, all dictated by a few centralized powers that completely gatekeep your access to true intelligence.
So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the threat of systemic control, compare the royalist cloud to the forest topology, look at becoming the sovereign pilot, dive into unbreakable remote context loops, and finish up with physical execution via the Flow cheerbot.
Okay, part 1. The threat of systemic control. Let's start right at the top by defining this massive crisis.
Our sources actually compare our current tech landscape to historical power grabs, like the 1689 breach. They frame centralized AI as this modern royalist counter-revolution, or what they call agentic kingship. So under this model, massive cloud monopolies force what's known as an interface inversion. Instead of you telling a computer what to do, this opaque machine sits perfectly between you and your actions. It dictates exactly how you're allowed to interact. They're pulling all your computational power behind their walled corporate gardens, and essentially they are entirely stripping away your local execution power.
And get this, the sheer scale of the hardware flaw beneath all this centralized control is just staggering. The sources point out that 80 to 90% of modern AI compute cycles rely on the floating point unit, or what they call the FPU gambler. Now, it's incredibly fast, but it's lossy. It's basically throwing darts at a board and just guessing the nearest mathematical answer. This creates what they call the wood chipper effect. When these massive language models process your data, they aren't handing you exact mathematical truth. No, they are chewing up the data, completely destroying its exact origin. The centralized cloud relies on probabilistic guessing, not strict truth.
Which brings us to part 2, the royalist cloud versus the forest topology. How do we actually fight back against this?
Well, we face two competing paradigms. On one side, you've got the centralized pipe. Think of it as a high-pressure system designed to suck data away from you into a central tank. In this pipe, you're just a digital tenant. You're a caged squirrel being fed metered little nuts of intelligence by a corporate landlord. But the alternative is the forest topology. This is a decentralized model that pushes intelligence to the extreme edges of the network. Out here, you are a sovereign participant. You're the squirrel hiding your own nuts, storing your own data, running your own local AI. So you can either be a caged tenant in the royalist cloud or a sovereign pilot flourishing out in the forest.
All right, part 3, becoming the sovereign pilot. Let's look at exactly how you step into that role today.
The sources lay out a strict 3-step protocol they call chopsticks engineering. It's all about using incredibly lightweight, surgical maneuvers to just completely bypass those bloated cloud APIs. Step 1, secure the physical substrate. That means you actually own the hardware sitting on your desk. Step 2, publish your unalterable intent, which creates a mathematically perfect text record of your command. And step 3, execute locally using what's called leaf node logistics. You command the hardware directly. You never have to ask a centralized tech monarch for permission.
And to secure that physical substrate, you absolutely do not need a multi-trillion-dollar enterprise server farm. The documentation makes it clear that an off-the-shelf appliance like a Synology NAS gives you back total ownership of your workloads. It's this highly accessible bridge that requires zero enterprise IT skills. You can spin up your own local agentic web, manage your private files, and break totally free from those endless cloud subscriptions, literally right from your living room.
Moving on to part 4, unbreakable remote context loops. Let's descend into the software layer. To protect our digital intent, we have to abandon fragile graphical user interfaces. GUIs are heavy, they rely on fragile screen scraping for AI to use, and honestly, they essentially reduce us to chimpanzees hitting shiny buttons for a dopamine hit. Instead, the sovereign pilot uses the command line interface. This is your agentic typewriter.
It's lightweight, it generates exact lossless text logs, and it acts as a direct, unmediated signal straight to the machine's arithmetic logic unit. You're safely compiling human imagination into perfect execution.
Think about how powerful this is. This agentic typewriter lets us build an unbreakable context loop using a pseudo-terminal wrapped in a tool like NewScreen. You launch this isolated, totally secure text channel and put in your intent. Then you can literally detach the session, slam your laptop shut, drop off your Wi-Fi, and just walk away. Your AI agent will keep running perfectly on your remote hardware. You can come back days later and reattach with mathematically certain zero data loss. No more refreshing web browsers and ruining hours of work.
And finally, Part 5. Physical execution via the Flow Cheerbot. This is the absolute bottom of the funnel.
To really ground all this abstract theory, I want to introduce you to the Flow X42 Cheerbot. From the outside, it just looks like a fun 3D printed desktop toy, right? But tucked inside is a localized Raspberry Pi microhost. It's a fully functioning robotic vending machine that acts as a physical switchboard for decentralized logic. It is living proof that this digital architecture can instantly manipulate the physical world, totally bypassing centralized intermediaries.
So how does the Cheerbot know what to do without playing a guessing game? It reads a mathematically pure last-in, first-out JSON state tree. By checking just the very first entry in line, what developers call index 0, it gets an immediate, flawless mathematical proof of the system's state. Zero ambiguity. It is either mathematically true or it isn't. No FPU gambler guesswork is allowed here.
And to actually trigger an action, they don't use massive, bloated, super expensive smart contracts. Instead, the system uses beautiful chopsticks design. It triggers a dormant 30-year-old internet status code, HTTP 402. That stands for payment required. It's an incredibly surgical, lightweight webhook architecture.
So here's the exact route to leave sequence happening right on your desk. First, an abstract digital 402 payment webhook is triggered. Then, the client's wallet signs a cryptographic proof of what the sources call human sweat, meaning genuine human intent. Next, the Cheerbot reads that LIFO JSON state exactly at index 0. And boom, pure mathematical logic is translated seamlessly into a literal electrical signal.
The exact threshold where the digital world violently crashes into the physical world is right here at the GPIO pins. These general-purpose input-output pins, the tiny metal prongs on the Raspberry Pi, act as the hardware's nervous system. The verified math literally shocks the Cheerbot into action. It spins a motor, it turns on a light, dispensing physical cheer based purely on your sovereign command. And because we ditched the heavy, probabilistic guessing of the FPU gambler and relied entirely on exact, strict rule following, this execution is crazy efficient. The metabolic energy required drops to an astonishingly low 0.05 picojoules per operation. That is a 74 times reduction in energy compared to standard methods. It's lean, it's green, and most importantly, it's entirely under your control. We've traced an incredible journey today. We moved from Emad Mostak's stark warnings about centralized AI, through the forest topology, down into unbreakable text streams, all the way to a little robot dispensing cheer on a desk. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The blueprint for unmediated local execution is wide open, and the tools are already in your hands. So, as the great cloud enclosure tries to wall off your digital reality, will you passively succumb as a digital tenant, just renting your thoughts from an invisible tech monarch? Or will you secure your own hardware, wield the agentic typewriter, and ride out as the sovereign pilot of your machine? The choice is absolutely yours. Keep questioning the architecture around you, and I'll see you in the next explainer.